The hot Greek sun burned across the stone roads as King Leonidas led his 300 Spartan warriors toward the narrow mountain pass of Thermopylae, the place that would soon become a legend. Their bronze armor shined like fire under the daylight, their crimson cloaks waving behind them like blood-red banners of courage. Each man moved with the calm steps of someone who had already accepted death but walked forward anyway because their country needed them. Leonidas walked at the front, with his heavy shield strapped to his arm, his spear balanced easily in his hand, and his eyes watching the distant hills where birds circled as if sensing the coming storm. His warriors, Dionysus, Stelios, Ariston, Lysandros, and the rest, walked behind him in perfect formation, joking softly, gripping their shields, checking each other's armor, tightening each other's straps, and sharing small smiles that hid their fear. They were soldiers, but they were also brothers, men raised from childhood to stand as one wall, one heart, one unbreakable line. Leonidas stopped sometimes and looked back at them, proud that these 300 chosen men were more than warriors, they were the spirit of Sparta. As they marched, the sound of their sandals hitting the dirt created a steady beat, like the slow heartbeat of a giant animal walking toward fate. They passed villages where farmers stopped working to watch them. Women came out of houses with tears in their eyes, and children raised small wooden swords in the air, pretending to be Spartans. Leonidas nodded at them, knowing that these small faces were the reason he had agreed to the impossible mission. The Persian Empire, led by King Xerxes, was coming with an army so large that some said it drank rivers dry and made the earth tremble beneath its feet. Greece was small, divided, always arguing, but Leonidas believed one thing: if someone did not stand first, no one would stand at all. So he chose his 300 warriors, men with living sons, so Sparta would not lose its future, and he marched them toward a narrow pass where numbers meant nothing, where courage alone could hold back a storm. They camped by small fires at night, sharpening their spears, oiling their shields, laughing loudly to push away the fear that crept into the dark. Dionysus, known for his sharp wit, joked, "They say the Persians are so many their arrows will block out the sun." Stelios grinned, replying, "Good, then we will fight in the shade." Leonidas listened silently, feeling a warmth spread in his chest. These men did not fear death, they only feared failing their homeland. He walked among them, placing a hand on shoulders, sharing simple words like, "Rest well," or "You will make Sparta proud." But each warrior carried those words like sacred fire. They spoke of their families, their memories, their dreams. Ariston spoke of the daughter he had never taught to walk. Lysandros whispered that his wife had kissed him 3 times instead of 2 before he left, a sign she feared the gods had already judged him. Leonidas listened to every story, storing them in his heart, because he knew he might be the last person alive to remember them. On the final morning before reaching Thermopylae, fog rolled across the land like a ghostly blanket. The Spartans rose quietly, their armor cold to the touch, their breaths visible in the air. Leonidas climbed a small rock and addressed his men. He told them that the pass was narrow, too narrow for the Persian numbers to matter, and that their shields would form a wall no enemy could break. He reminded them that they were not just soldiers, they were Sparta's shield, Greece's first line, and the last hope that the world would remember freedom. His voice echoed across the hills, strong and calm. "We stand together, we die together, and in dying we show the world what it means to be free." The warriors raised their spears and roared, the sound shaking the fog away like wind. Then they marched forward again, toward the narrow pass between the cliffs and the sea, toward the place where 300 men would soon face the greatest army ever seen.
The cliffs rose like giant stone walls on one side, and the sea crashed loudly on the other, sending white foam up against the rocks. This was the pass of Thermopylae, a narrow throat of land only wide enough for a handful of men to stand side by side. Leonidas looked at the walls of stone and sea and smiled quietly to himself. This was the perfect battlefield for Spartans. He placed his warriors into formation, each shield overlapping the next, each spear pointed forward like the teeth of a metal beast ready to bite. The sun had barely climbed when the distant dust clouds appeared, rising from the horizon like smoke from a forest fire. The Persians were coming. Their footsteps shook the earth like thunder. Their banners, black and gold, waved in the wind like hungry flames. The first wave of Persian soldiers marched forward, tall men with curved swords, wicker shields, and bright trousers. They shouted loudly, trying to intimidate the Spartans, but the 300 men stood silent, their breathing slow, their eyes cold. When the Persians charged, the sound was like a roaring storm, but when they struck the Spartan wall, it was like hitting a cliff. Shields slammed forward, spears thrust out like lightning, and Persian bodies crashed down onto the rocky ground with screams echoing across the pass. Stelios fought beside his king, pushing the enemy back with powerful thrusts, each movement sharp and controlled. Dionysus laughed as he fought, shouting, "Is this the great army we were promised? I've seen braver sheep." His humor gave strength to the men around him, who tightened their shields and pushed harder. Wave after wave came, each crashing against the Spartans like water hitting an unbreakable boulder. And every time the Persians fell back, leaving their dead as proof that courage could defeat numbers. When the Immortals, the elite Persian soldiers with black masks, stepped forward, the ground grew quiet. They moved with skill and discipline, but the Spartans met them with even greater skill. Leonidas stepped into the front line, his spear piercing through the immortal commander's chest, and the battlefield erupted with new fury. Ariston called out to the younger Spartan beside him, "Hold the line! Think of your son!" And the young warrior roared as he struck his enemies with renewed strength. Hours passed, and still the Spartans stood unbroken. Their arms shook with exhaustion, their shields splintered, their spears bent or broken, but their hearts burned stronger than ever. The Persians could not understand how so few men fought with such terrifying unity. The sun dipped low, turning the sea red and gold, and still the Spartans fought. When the Persians finally retreated near sunset, the Spartans stood in the dusty pass, covered in sweat and blood, breathing like tired lions after a hunt. Leonidas looked at his warriors, many wounded, all weary, and he felt pride deeper than words. They had held back the greatest empire on earth for one full day, and tomorrow they would do it again. That night they sat around small fires again, though their bodies ached and their hands trembled from exhaustion. They cleaned their wounds, sharpened their weapons, and spoke softly about home. Leonidas joked that he needed a new spear because this one has run out of Persians to stab. The others laughed, the sound rough but genuine, helping them forget the fear of what tomorrow might bring. Stelios placed a hand on a younger warrior's shoulder and told him he had fought like 10 men. Leonidas moved among them, checking on each of his soldiers, giving them his calm presence when words were not enough. The sea wind blew cold through the pass, but their fire warmed them. They knew the Persians would return with more men, more fury, and more determination. They knew their chances of survival were small, but no one spoke of retreat. No one whispered of fear. 300 men sat together as brothers, waiting for dawn, knowing that every hour they lived gave Greece more time to prepare. And when the fire crackled softly and the stars appeared above the cliffs, Leonidas whispered to himself, "Tomorrow, we fight again."
At dawn, the sky glowed with pale gold, as if the gods themselves watched over the battlefield. The Spartans rose with stiff muscles and bruised ribs, but their spirits still burned bright. Leonidas knew what was coming. A Greek trader had revealed a hidden mountain path to the Persians, allowing them to surround the Spartans. But he did not tell his men yet. Instead, he ordered the Greek allies to retreat, while he and his 300 would stay and hold the pass alone. The allies hesitated because they knew what it meant. Leonidas simply said, "Go. Tell the world what happened here." His voice carried the weight of a king who had accepted death with honor. When the allies left, Leonidas finally told his warriors that they were surrounded, that this day would be their last. There was no fear, only silence, and then steady determination. Stelios stepped forward and said, "Then this day will be the greatest day we ever lived." The men lifted their shields with renewed strength, not because they expected victory, but because duty and honor were their breath, their heartbeat, their purpose. They tightened their formation one last time, standing shoulder to shoulder like a single living wall of bronze. The Persians came like a black wave, their arrows filling the sky, but the Spartans lifted their shields overhead, forming a bronze roof that blocked the storm of missiles. When the arrows stopped, the Persian infantry charged, and the Spartans roared back with all the fire left in their bodies. Spear tips flashed, shields slammed, and the narrow pass turned into a whirl of dust, blood, and desperate cries. Leonidas fought at the front, his bronze armor cracked, his voice still strong as he shouted orders. Ariston fought beside him until a spear struck his leg and he fell, but he kept swinging his sword from the ground, refusing to stop. Leonidas laughed even as blood streamed down his arm, yelling, "Come on then, I'm not done yet!" The Spartans pushed the Persians back again and again, but the enemy was endless. Finally, the Immortals arrived from behind, completing the circle around the Spartans. Leonidas saw them coming and shouted, "Spartans, today we dine in Hades!" The men roared with him, lifting their shields as they turned to face enemies from both sides. The fighting grew chaotic, no formation left, only raw courage. Leonidas killed 2 Immortals before a spear struck his side. He fell to one knee, but he continued fighting until another spear pierced his chest. His warriors saw their king fall and roared in fury, forming a ring around his body, fighting to protect him even in death. One by one, the Spartans fell. Stelios fought until his shield broke, then he fought with his sword, then with a dagger, then with his bare hands before he was cut down. Dionysus laughed even as blood streamed down his arm, yelling, "Come on then, I'm not done yet!" The final few Spartans formed a small circle, back to back, surrounded entirely by Persian soldiers. Their breaths were heavy, their bodies broken, but their eyes still sharp and fearless. They fought until they could no longer lift their arms, and when the last Spartan fell, the pass of Thermopylae fell silent. When the battle ended, the Persians looked around at the sea of their own dead and realized what these 300 men had done. They had held back the greatest army in the world for days. They had fought together as brothers, with courage beyond understanding. Their sacrifice gave Greece the time to unite and later defeat Persia. Leonidas and his 300 became immortal, not in life, but in memory, in legend, in the hearts of all who value freedom. And so the world remembers them not as warriors who died, but as heroes who stood when no one else would, and whose bravery